This sounds like rabbits. Today we will be estimating the fairy talent death rate by their nature and the nature of their jobs. Also, how often they get killed versus how often they get others killed. We will leave out death by unbelief and murder. We have the tiers. S. Accidental nuke. A. Accidental talent side. B. Death by immediate vicinity. C. By my own hand. D. Occupational hazards. E. Freak accident. And F. Old age. Okay, accidental nuke more has to do with, like, that one we'll explain later, but accidental talent side is like a one level down, and death by immediate vicinity is basically you're likely to get people around, the people who are immediately around you killed, as well as yourself. By your own hand, by my own hand, is basically you're more likely to get yourself killed than anybody else. Occupational hazards is just stuff you would expect to kill you if you're not careful, based entirely on what you do. And freak accident is just like, it is not an occupational hazard, and it only happens every once in a while. It's very rare that it would happen. And old age. Just old age. We'll start with the ones associated with nature. Art fairies. I imagine worst case scenario for them would be like maybe something they're sculpting falls on top of them, squishes them, or, well, they've got painting, polishing, dyeing, glass blowing, and sculpting. Those are the subcategories of art, of the art talents. But like with them, the worst case scenarios would be like them falling asleep and drowning in some polished dye or paint, or the glass blowing just kind of being like, well, the glass blowing is actually really dangerous. You really need to know what you're doing, and if you do something, if you put your mouth on it too soon, you will burn your face or roast your lungs. That's what I figure. I don't know exactly. But I would put it, but overall, I think art would fall under occupational hazards. Just right there. Kitchen and cooking fairies. Baking, cooking, cleaning, stuff having to do with hole in cheese punching. Why is that there? Why do they have that? Okay, baking. A lot with baking can, worst case scenario with baking and cooking is that you could, like, accidentally cut your fingers, accidentally chop your fingers or hand off. Well, your hand's significantly less likely, but you're more likely to cut your fingers off accidentally, but then that won't kill you. It'll make things more difficult, but it won't necessarily kill you. Because nursing fairies will take care of it. With them, the only other thing is when it comes to cooking, you can overheat and die that way. Just things like that. So occupational hazards, they fall under that one too. Nursing fairies. Yeah, their whole job is to heal people, and I can't really think of a worst case scenario for them, because, like, well, unless there's like a viral disease going around and like that kills them off. But you notice that's not very common. So I put that under freak accident. Freak accident. Storytelling fairies. Tall tale telling, acting, music, singing, and performing. So worst case scenario with them is that somebody throws a knife at them because their acting is so bad. but that wouldn't be their talent if that was the case. Or maybe they use a real knife in place of a fake knife and accidentally stab themselves to death. That's been known to happen with actors. They get so caught up in the role. Like, well, actually, no, there was this is something that has happened to actors. Like, they do something, they're not paying attention, and they accidentally kill themselves. So, at worst, by my own hand. At best, is our best case scenario freak accident. So, scouting, protecting, far listening, far seeing, forest living maps, and basically just protecting people in general when there's something dangerous around that they can actually protect them from, like a monstrous beast. It's less of an occupational hazard and more like it's probably an occupational hazard because like the only way they would really die is by somebody telling them is by defending somebody else and just jumping in the way of an animal attacking another fairy. That's normally what people who protect people, that's their job. It's literally their job to fight and protect. Sewing talent, measuring shoe making, lace making shoe shiny. Worst case scenario with that, they poke themselves, don't go to the nursing fairies, and end up dying from an infection. That's that is probably the worst they would go through. So I put them at like somewhere between occupational hazard and not freak accident and occupational hazard. I don't know, another worst case scenario. Well, no, worst case scenario for a sewing fairy would be if like they get caught in, they get trapped in some fabric and end up suffocating to death or being choked to death because like they get a scarf wrapped around themselves and it's like okay. So yeah, freak accident. Freak accident or occupational hazard. Dust fairies. The most ration packing, distributing, arrival sprinkling, and dust grinding. Worst case scenarios for that would be the dust grinding, they accidentally get caught in the machine and get crushed along with the dust. And that would probably, and I think that would be a freak accident, more like. But pixie dust alchemy is basically, if you don't know what you're doing, you will make a mess, which is exactly what we see in the movie. Another occupational hazard is just like coming across a wild animal that just eats them. They couldn't get away fast enough from an animal. Like a hawk or something. So yeah, that's dustkeeper fairies. It's pretty much the worst case scenarios. So I'd put them as freak accidents or actually no, more occupational hazard. Yeah, occupational hazard. Mining fairies, earth moving and gem identification. Miners, they tend to, like, worst case scenarios with mining is basically there's like a earthquake or something and you get crushed underneath a whole pound of dirt, of like hundreds of pounds of dirt, or or your tunnel collapses and you get stuck in there with no food, no air. Well, no food and very little air. And you basically suffocate or starve to death depending on how much air you have in there. So occupational hazard. They fall under occupational hazard. Well, there's also accidentally hitting somebody with a pick. So, helper fairies. Basically, they take care of anything. They basically take care of anything involving the queen and doing odds and ends for like celebrations and making sure that the queen is taken care of. So actually, worst case for them, worst case scenario would probably be okay. They probably wouldn't wander away from the home tree very often, if at all. So I'm thinking like worst case scenario is something collapses on top of them. So I put that as like somewhere between freak accident and old age. Tinker. Okay. The thing about the tinkers is by nature, they are super curious about everything around them, so they're more likely to cause problems. I mean, you see, like, Tinkerbell has this tendency to almost get her friends killed because of her curiosity. She almost gets herself killed a number of times. And I don't know, we just really wanted to do this one because this is the one we're going to put in accidental nuke. Because out of all of them, if they're not paying attention, Fairy Mary's job is basically to make sure that they are kept busy enough to keep them from being, to basically make them too busy to be to explore their curiosity. Because out of all of them, they're probably the most likely to find an atom and try to split it in half, just to see what would happen. Out of all of them, so yeah. Tinkers, I would imagine, like, they find a bear trap, they accidentally set it off and kill like 15 of them. At worst. Well, no, at best. Because, like, yeah, the only way to keep a tinker alive is to keep them so busy that they don't have time to do anything else. So, yeah. S tier. Clapping, making children believe. This one is only this one only has one fairy involved in it. This one, you die of old age. There's literally nothing that can go wrong with this beyond like a freak accident.
Or kids swatting them.
No.
Ah, what are you?
No, they just kind of clap along with the lines of... No, they kind of just clap along with the lines of magic, so it's just like... We believe in fairies! Come on! Come on, everybody! We believe in fairies! That's her thing. That's what she does. She also finds other fairies, according to that one story I read. Well, according to the comics. She finds other fairies that have just, like, just appeared out of nowhere. She can hear a laugh coming! So... yeah. She does help others, so I think if she does die for some reason, it's more than likely because somebody else got her killed. So yeah, freak accident or old age. Just she does not have a dangerous job. Cleaning is a whole talent. This is like what would regulate just
Dishes.
Freak hazards. Oh, sorry, freak accidents. Freak accidents is more than likely being with cleaning because like or occupational hazards because like you can slip on some but they have wings. They fly, so they're probably mopping while flying at the same time so that nobody slips on it. Yeah, and they don't use any hard chemicals like bleach, more than likely because they're very nature based and well because their society, they wouldn't have bleach. It doesn't exist there. Next we have scribe, scribble from Neverbeast, and Dewey from the Winterwoods. They're both scribes, and for the worst case scenario for them, the writing, book sorting, and studying things, between the two of them, they're really the only ones, which I'm a little confused about that, but meh.
No, there's a few more in the books.
Anyway, between them is like the worst thing that could worst case scenario. They are the Dewey gets crushed by a pile of books that just falls down for some reason, or well, that weren't improperly stacked books. He gets crushed underneath them, or scribble bookcase falls over. Just I think with them it would be more of a freak accident. They would fall under freak accident. Now the ruling, and then last but not least for me at least, is the ruling class. The ruling class is basically the queen, the ministers, the lord, and administrators. The queen, she has everything taken care of for her, and as I said, we're not including murder on this list. So, like, what would naturally kill her? And my answer would probably be, at best, a freak accident, probably involving Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell specifically. Ministers, like ministers of spring, the minister of spring, minister of summer, minister of winter, and then there's Lord Mallory, who's in charge of the Winter Woods for the most part. And then you got the administrators, which are like Fairy Mary and Fairy Gary. Basically, their job is to make sure nobody else gets killed by making sure they're doing their jobs right. So, for them, it's more than likely going to be either a freak accident or they die of old age. That's just their thing. And these ones are associated with nature. Fast flying. Their main jobs is messaging, summoning crystal breeze, and directing baby lefts to the pixie tree. They mostly control wind. And for the most part, they keep themselves out of trouble. Because of their jobs, there's honestly not much that would kill them. But you see that very clearly that they can get dragged into projects and whatnot by tinkers. But I think that goes for most fairies. So I would probably put them in the, well, worst case scenario, they're not watching where they're going and get impaled by a tree limb. So I'm going to put it in the C tier. Or the C and D tier. Now the fire fairies, when it comes to them, they only showed up in like one book. Fire creation, fire manipulation. They sometimes cook, but they find that very boring. They really like being showy. And defense. They will defend other fairies with fire. And frankly, when you think about their job, they play with fire. They could accidentally light up an entire forest if they're not careful. So I would probably put, especially the inexperienced fire talent fairies, into the B tier. Just because. It'd be completely by accident. Now, the garden fairies can take care of their sub-talents will include flowers, fern spotting, fruit, rice growing, tree tending, harvest, hole digging, leaf, tree picking, fruit stomping, tree bark grading. Some of these are just dumb. Well, with them, the haphazard would be dealing with highly toxic plants. So it would be more of an occupational hazard. So I would put them in the E tier. And if they're not paying attention, they could get gobbled up by a hawk. Because they work out in the open. So I would put them in the E tier. Light fairies. Star counting, rainbow creating, lights. Handling fireflies. Like, they have a very because of where they work, they're like really easy to pick off for hawks. Because they work out in the open where they can be easily spotted, but they're also surrounded. But they also work in sunflower meadow, which they are dressed to look just like those things. So I would also put them in the E tier. Or not the E tier. Like, what's the E tier again? Okay, D tier. D tier for the first, for the light in the garden. I'm getting those a little mixed up. Water. Worst case scenario. They accidentally drown themselves. So they would probably be more in the C tier. just completely accidentally drowning themselves. Like they get their wings, a little soggy, and they're like in the middle of the lake or pond, and they just drown. Yeah, so C tier. Animals. They have this rule where you are not supposed to deal with the more dangerous animals. You can deal with the babies of some of the dangerous animals, like bears and foxes, because you see those in the show. Because they're so cute. On the other hand, hawks, snakes, bad ideas. And considering how many animals would clearly try to eat them if they're not careful, I would more put it in the D, occupational hazard. Die from occupational hazard. It's like, honestly, with the animal fairies, it's like some of the sub talents, it's just ridiculous. Ant herding. They don't need help with that. Butterfly herding sometimes. Caterpillar shearing. Not that many caterpillars are actually fuzzy, and most of the time you do not want that fuzz. Cricket whistling. That's adorable. Hibernation bedtime story. With the animal fairies, worst case scenarios, stampedes and getting eaten by the very things they're trying to take care of. So, occupational hazards. Yeah. See if I get off the cord. See if I get off the cord. You're about to take down the computer. Winter. With the frost fairies, it's more along the lines of they just put little ice crystals around everything and keeps them alive and keeps things alive. No real occupational hazard there. So you can sort of still breathe through frost instead of straight up ice. Snowflake. That's a very easy job. It's not dangerous at all. Glacier. That's not that hard a job either. The worst case scenario is they accidentally freeze their hand to the glacier. But it wouldn't kill them. Winter animal fairies. They would have somewhat of the same problems as the regular animal fairies, but slightly worse because most of the winter animals that wander about are predatory. So they're going to be dealing with a lot of foxes, if they had to, they would deal with a polar bear. Minks. So the occasional rabbit. They would mostly, and snowy owls, definite snowy owls. You can see those in the show. So if they're lucky, they don't get eaten by the very thing they're trying to take care of. So most of them I would put under old age or freak I would put them between old age and freak accident, except for the winter animals. I would stick them alongside the regular animal fairies. Then last there's winter. Sorry, not winter. Weather. I'm looking at it. I see weather. Storm fairies. They could get themselves electrocuted or accidentally electrocute someone else. Especially the lightning fairies. The ones that produce storms. The rumble. Thunder. This worst case scenario for him, he accidentally gets others killed by being way too close, sending a shockwave that's way too strong for them, make them all explode and be nasty. Rain fairies could accidentally drown other fairies. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's rain fairies. It'd be like a subsection of water fairies. The weather fairies also tend to detect weather patterns. They're like the meteorologists. I may have said that wrong. Of the fairy world. And worst case scenario for them is they don't succeed at predicting weather that well, I'd put them at freak accidents. So between freak accident and occupational hazard. And that's what we got.
Bye.
Bye.